Welcome to episode one of How to Start a Podcast, a show on how to start, build, grow your podcast featuring advice from some of the best creators out there. Today's guest is the awesome Julian Dorey. And I'm just going to ask Julian for a quick 30-second intro about himself and how he got started with podcasting. Julian, what's up?
Thanks for having me, Chris. This is awesome, man. So, as you said, my name is Julian Dorey. I am the host of Trendifier with Julian Dorey. And I got into podcasting in 2020. It was started as something people told me I should look into, so I started researching how it would be done, had really no plan with it, and then when the pandemic hit, all my equipment happened to arrive from my orders on day one of quarantine, so I was like, well, that's kind of a sign. And I started building, and then I launched in September, and this is what I do, full-time.
Wow. And so since you've started, I think you've interviewed some really awesome people. Like I remember watching that episode with Alex Horowitz and another one with Terrence Jones as well. And so I'm going to ask you for just some quick thoughts on the value of, because you really leverage your studio during these interviews. So I guess I want to ask you your quick thoughts on the value of a good studio and how that's helped your podcast. And we will dive into this deeper across the length of the interview as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends what you're trying to do. So if you are trying to create a small podcast in support of a business that you have where you don't care about the money coming in or not coming in, then you can do things like Zoom, like you're doing a 20 episode series here. So this is perfect for something like this. I'm looking to be an entertainer as well, and not an entertainer that puts on an act, but an entertainer who has real conversations with people. Like, you know, I always say it's the common word that people use, like, oh, you interview people. I don't interview anybody. They'll call me up before, they'll be like, yo, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I have no fucking idea. Like, we're just going to talk, you know? So when they come in, we do long form content, and you know, it's a closed studio. Time doesn't really exist, and then we end up having 3 hours of content every single time. Usually I have to stop the podcast because they're not done. But I guess to answer your question about the studio, if you're going to do something like that, you need to have an intense connection with the people you're bringing in, especially when a lot of times you're bringing in someone you've never personally met before, where you start getting connected with people, and the vibe is everything. So I knew if you were, going to go after a podcast where you're going to be seeking to entertain and add some sort of value where people view you as like a Joe Rogan or somebody who's got a huge podcast that they view as like an escape. If you're going to do that, you have to create quality. And in order to get quality, you have to have great guests who come in and feel like they're very comfortable to say whatever the hell they want to say, and it's this kind of professional setting. So I really wanted to create a vibe here where it's like, hey, everything's closed off. This is an absolute place where when the door shuts, like the headphones go on, we're listening to each other, and there's nowhere else to be.
Interesting. So then the thing that I get from that that's so cool is you almost like create an environment for your guests to be like super comfortable, right?
100%.
The whole thing is designed. Okay. So can you tell me a bit more about how do you do that? Like, how do you just make them feel so safe and just forget about everything else?
Well, the first thing is you got to be really great at this. I mean, it's like anything else in life. Like, you go to play basketball, you can either hit a 20-foot jumper or you can't. You know, you can go to a court and you can see who can drive to the lane and who can't. And with podcasting, because of the access to just being able to put something recorded out there and how easy it is now, there are over 2 million podcasts in this country, and a lot of them aren't good, to be frank, because people inherently think because of the ease of access that like, oh, I have something to say, so I'll just say it, and regardless of how I put it out there, people will listen. And that's, you know, there's 24 hours in a day, and people already have a lot of different ways they need to spend it. They already don't have enough of it. They're not just going to listen to something because they know you or because, you know, you put something out there and they're going to pick you out of the 2 million. So I knew that if I was going to build this out, yeah, you want to get them comfortable when they come in so that you can actually have the opportunity to create good content. But I really had to go about setting up something that was going to take this to a different level, that was going to show, I mean, the way I looked at it was, if you're crazy enough to get into a space where there are people with tens of millions of listeners, every single thing within your, and I'm talking about like individual shows, successful ones, the top of the cream of the crop, every single thing that is within your control that you can be better at them from day one on, you should take within your control and be better at them from day one on. And so that's what I did. I built a studio that has better equipment than some of the best podcasts in the world and has an audio quality that, frankly, no one really exports in.
Okay. So when you say that, when you talk about your equipment and how that's affected your like relationship with your guests, can you but like, so let's say you bought all this equipment, right? You said at the start of the pandemic you got all this fantastic equipment and it arrived. How did you like just walk me through how you like leverage that to make your guests like, because everyone's got their phones, they've got like things going on, like they're super busy, and you're able to extract 3 hours of content there, which is incredible. And so like, how do you use that equipment, or like, is it the equipment, is it the environment? Like, what do you do to like get that like length of time with them and isolate them in that way?
Well, I'll go back to the one point I made, which is I found my thing here. This is what I am great at. This is what I'm supposed to do. And so there is an eye test that when someone goes to look at 60 seconds of something you've done, if they've never seen you before, and they go check out my YouTube channel, they check out my Instagram page, they're not looking at the number of followers, though that stuff is actually growing now. It's still very small, but they're looking at, oh, this is different. And that's the common refrain I get, because there is no bullshit here. There is no agenda. You can either get on this mic and be able to get the other person opened up in a very natural way, or you can't. And I can. And so to bring in the studio to that, the studio plays a role supporting that, in the sense that if it were just me and someone else talking at the kitchen table and we were capturing that on content, the feeling while it's happening and then even after it's happening when you watch it or listen to it would not be the same, because the quality's not there on the after part. And then when you're in the middle of it, it is kind of like anything else, right? It's kind of like any other conversation, which is exactly what we're going for here. But the difference is, when you put this sound through equalizers and you put it through a mixer and you create a crisp sound that you put in someone's ears with headphones on and the doors shut and the volume turned up, and you are just sitting across from that person, there is a connection and an absolute bond that occurs with that cannot be replicated. I often say that if they took a studio like this, and before, as a prerequisite to going to divorce court, they would send couples going through a divorce into a studio like this and lock the door and put the headphones on each of their ears and say you're not allowed to leave for 12 hours, divorce lawyers would go out of business. I really believe that.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement, but that's actually really impressive then, in terms of the thing you've created. So like, taking a moment here, can you dive deeper into because the equipment itself, like what do you use? How do you create this ambiance?
Okay, I actually have a doc pulled up so I don't mess up any of the names, but I use a lot.
Oh, wow.
So you'll see a lot of podcasts that'll set up 2 base cameras, maybe they even use an iPhone, and a simple mic that isn't a Shure SM7B, which we can talk about, and maybe one audio outlet. Maybe they record straight into the computer, although I don't know how that would work if they did that. But they probably have something like a Zoom or a Tascam to actually catch the audio, and it's like a mini mixer or something like that. And then, you see some solid podcasts that'll have like an okay mixer, and as it gets up the realm here, you start to get, by realm I mean like some of the best, highest quality podcasts in the world, they start to add more tools to the shed there, so to speak. And so my thought process was, well, let's get all the tools in the shed from day one. I don't ever want to have to add anything. I'm sure at some point, I'll think of something that I'll add, but I really wanted to capture an entire ambiance right away. I wanted people who just put headphones in and were listening to the podcast to feel something different. And then I wanted the people who were going to see the clips of the content or actually watch it on YouTube to feel like it was a space that they were virtually sitting in. I wanted people to be able to listen to an episode where it's me and a guest, and the people who are listening feel like they're sitting at the table with us. And so in order to do that, you have to create something that makes people feel good. And you can use the example of Rogan here, because for years, people, I mean, they loved his studios, this little cozy, like, man cave kind of thing. And then he did, like, I don't know, maybe like 100, 150 episodes when he moved to Austin in this, frankly, kind of not good studio that they built because they had to throw it together quickly, and it was way different. And it was still like this cozy type environment, but the fans hated it, and they were commenting on it left and right. And you kind of say to yourself, you know, if you're not someone in podcasting, you're like, well, why do fans care, like, where they do the podcast? They care because there's a feeling you get when you look at it. And so I wanted to create that from day one. And, you know, if you want, we can get into some of the equipment in here, but I feel like we did that.
Yeah. So I think we'll definitely have a list of equipment that you recommend in the show notes, just so
Sure.
that people can always, like, come back to it. But maybe off the top of your head, what do you think are, like, some of the most important, like, devices off the entire list, like, that you think, like, really stand out in their value to you?
Start right here. The Shure SM7B mic. It's the only mic. I sat up for 2 months late at night just studying everything. I went, and this is right before the pandemic too, when I was doing all this. So I went to some of the major outlets and actually sat on Saturdays in person with people testing things. And I started to realize that if you look at all the best podcasts in the world, they all have a Shure SM7B mic. And you can try to be smart and say, well, I'll do something different. But chances are, if everyone's using something, it's probably pretty fucking good. And after a while, I realized that this mic was basically, it's like, I think they call it like a cardioid mic. So, and I probably pronounced that wrong. Like, I know this, I don't know this. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of know it from my head. But it allows sound to be able to be captured, like, in a solid compressed way, such that your volume doesn't fluctuate, and it's crisp, so that you're almost like talking in somebody's ear, like if they're listening in a headphone. I listened to some other good mics, or what are called good mics, even some that were even priced more expensive than a Shure, which made no sense to me, because they did not do that. It did not have the same effect. I mean, especially like if you go down to the low stuff, you would never use like a blue ball mic and stuff like that. Like, obviously you're not even looking at that, but the sound difference is just unbelievable. So that was a must. And when I talk to people, I'm like, first of all, the Shure SM7B is not like several $1,000s. It's like $400 or $500. Like, it's not that much money. So if you're going to invest in doing a good podcast and you have to get a mic for $400 or $500, that's a good deal to me. So start there. And then cameras are important. Cameras you want to get, I mean, especially if you're filming for YouTube, which then if you film at that 1080 by 1920, you know, you can cut that up on any platform at different sizes. So it's fine to use. But you want to get something that looks, it looks professional, but not trying too hard. You know, like, I'm not saying, who's the one guy? I can't remember his name. Oh, I'm blanking on it. But there's one guy who's a pretty big podcaster. Maybe it's like a top 100 podcast, who's got this, you know, he's very wealthy. He's got this souped out studio with like 4K mics all over the place. Eventually, yeah, maybe you'd want to get to that because you earn that and people come to expect that, and it's cool. But I don't even know if I would ever get to that, because you still want to have that like homeliness feeling. What you don't want to do is make it seem like it's a goddamn home video. You want it to have that, no, like, this is professional. This is a professional operation type feel. So I think they're called Canon Vixias. So it's, let me get the exact name for you. It is the Canon HFG50. So and it's the Vixia line. So I think it's the Canon Vixia HFG50. And they have the ability to shoot in 4K. But the other thing is, if you want to film anything in 4K, like if anyone's throwing that around and saying like, oh, should I do that? The amount of data and processing you need on your computer to be able to edit even 3 minutes of 4K content is absurd. You basically need a 64 RAM powered computer that is, to think of it this way, that is a full-blown Mac computer, that the highest one that costs like $5-6 grand. So you can't do this on like a MacBook or a MacBook Pro or, you know, any type of Dell laptop or something like that. So really no one does that. But these cameras do have the ability to do that. So I can film in 1080, which is HD, at a very high bit rate, which in English means it looks clean and it looks really crisp. And when you're coming across my video as opposed to, you know, even like a solid YouTube quality video, it's going to show a difference.
That's, you know, that's really cool because, you know how we're talking right now about like an in-person studio environment?
Mm-hmm.
Like what you're talking about, like in terms of 1080, is almost exactly what so I'm using Riverside, you know, the software we're using right now to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it's doing is it's like, it's recording in 1080 or something on your local machine and then uploading that to the cloud. And so even though you and I aren't seeing each other in 1080, the final output will be like super high res because it's like storing that locally and then uploading that.
Yep.
And so that's really cool. So you're saying your mics are somehow able to, like they're recording at a high bit rate, getting a really clean thing, and looking at it in 1080 instead of like doing 4K or something like that.
The cameras
4K is
are
just harder.
The cameras.
Yeah, the cameras. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because 4K, even though it like looks cleaner, is harder to edit.
Oh my God. So, yeah. Because think of it this way: you're basically, and it's more than this, but 4K or HD is 1080, and then 4K on the same end of the dimension. I guess the height there is double that, so it's like 2160. And so the data that adds in is like exponential. That's my understanding of it. It's not even like double. It's a lot more. So I remember trying to edit when I first had this. I was figuring everything out because I didn't know any of this stuff. I started trying to edit in 4K, and my computer was just dying, and I got a great computer. And so then I was doing research on all kinds of forums online. I was like, holy shit, okay, yeah, that's not possible. Like, we would have to get like a full souped out machine in here to be able to do that. But 1080 will be good. And then the back end is like, yeah, to go back to the mics, like the audio's got to sound very, very crisp. And there's also, look, getting the mics is just the first part of the battle. Getting to a sound like I got to took a lot of other things too.
Like what? Like dive into that for me. Like, because you, like right now I'm hearing it and it sounds great. And I've heard your podcasts and they sound phenomenal.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Yeah.
So.
Big fan.
Thank you. Couple things. First, you got to get, I mean, I would do it this way. I would get a mixer. So I have a full-blown 16-channel mixer from Behringer. I think it's the Behringer, I want to get that exact name so I have it right. It's the Behringer Xenyx. What line was it? I'll get the full line. I want to give the number right, but you know, it's a 16-channel
Don't worry, like
mixer that allows me to. I mean, it allows me to do a lot. Obviously, we can equalize the voice. You can play with compression, playing with volume levels all the time, and then there's a whole bunch of other little things that, you know, get a little too complicated to talk about. But I learned that inside and out, and like we've recorded music in this studio, which I need to be clear. If you've ever been to a music recording studio, you ever been there?
I've as a kid, yeah.
Yeah, so
it's intense.
Whole different level. Like what is required for a podcast studio to get a great sound and to make great music, two very different things. It's so scientific, it's down to like the inches of like the pad that's on the wall right above the mic. So I wouldn't recommend doing music in a place like this, but we did pull it off to produce a song, like an early cut of it, and it actually came out solid. But it required like a fuck ton of editing to get it there. That mixer gave me a lot of tools to be able to capture much of those sounds we were recording before I even got it to the digital station to play with it. So huge believer in that, because to bring it back to my podcast, when I'm recording a podcast, the sound that I have set up through the mixer and then through the other stuff I have here, I don't have to mess with that. I don't touch it at all on the digital side. It's done. When it's recorded, it's finished. The only thing I will touch is I'll move the decibel level up, maybe 1 or 2, depending on how the volume was coming in. I usually do that, and that's one click, like the entire thing, done, right? And then if there's somewhere where we yelled really loud, I may subtract the decibels in that area if it was like extra loud. And the only other thing would be once in a while, there'll be like a little crack or cackle, whatever it's called, that coming in through the mixer into Adobe Premiere Pro. That's why I have the backup audio on the Zoom captured there as well that runs through the mixer and into the Zoom H6, so that if something like that happens, sometimes it won't get picked up by the Zoom, and I'll bring that piece from the Zoom in and just seamlessly slide it in. That doesn't happen that often, though. But yeah.
When you say Zoom, are you talking about like you're not talking about the video conferencing tool?
No. So that's the Zoom H6 audio recorder. It's basically and it's like kind of portable too. It has its own mic on it, but I've never used that. It's basically, I guess a good way to put it would be, when I was first going about this and talking on forums, a lot of people were asking me, why would you ever buy a mixer and a Zoom? And that's my point, because the Zoom is my backup, because the mixer, I record through the mixer and into Adobe Premiere Pro, so that I can be checking my audio as this episode's going on. And then if for some reason the computer crapped out, the Zoom is it's stored on a SIM card, so it captures all the same audio through the mixer, and I have the settings set so it's literally exactly the same there. And then I have that backup if like Adobe Premiere crashed while I was sitting here with somebody. So the reason I say that is because some people will use the Zoom as a literal mixer. You cannot do on that what you can on a full-blown professional mixer. That is not an opinion. That's really a fact. Because there is a difference when you can play physically with an actual, turnstile and figure, I don't even know if that's what you call it, but play with each of the equalizer levels and play with the compression and hear it over and over again. There's artistically, because part of this is art, definitely there's a huge difference. And when I was trying to formulate the sound I wanted here, I would sit up late at night and I would take some of the best podcasts in the world that had some of the crispest sound, and I would record things on different iterations with the board, and then listen to it back in my headphones at like volume 100, simultaneously going back and forth with the other podcasts as well, and listening at volume 100, and then figuring out how they exported, at what bit rate, where their compression was a little less, where their equalizer was, like was it hitting some of the higher frequencies versus the lower frequency biases. And then, you want to create something that's yours and is built around your voice, but when you have tools like this, you can actually do that.
Okay. So actually there's like a few different ways that we can go with this. The first I wanted to get into was almost like, how did you learn this? Because it seems like you started at the start of the pandemic, right? And like kind of self-taught your way here. And we can get into that. The other one was almost like, I think you mentioned, like, I'm so curious what your like post-processing, just like journey looks like. And in terms of hours, like for each episode, do you change things? Like, what does that look like? So there's a lot of ways we can dive into this. Let's start with one, and then like we can go to two after that, which is like, hey, how did you learn this?
I mean, it really was all self-taught with obviously the help of all the resources on the internet. So I don't know if that's fully, you're learning from other. Do you want
to like give any shout outs or something? Yeah.
Shit, man.
Dude, I'm just saying because like the internet is huge. Like I looked up how to start a podcast today, and I saw like 50 episodes on setting up your studio. Yep. And I'm sure not everything is super relevant or helpful. So I'm just trying to get a sense.
I would love to give some shout outs if I could actually remember any of the people, because I looked through it. It wasn't at 1,000, maybe it got to that, but I mean it was hundreds of YouTube channels and individual videos. I built files of them. hundreds of chat forums, probably thousands of those. I mean, hundreds of articles, and then just iterating and figuring out like, oh, wait, that video said this, that article said this. Oh, okay, so that works. And then, you know, like I said, I took a couple Saturdays and I went to places with pros and I sat there and asked a lot of probably stupid questions and learned it inside and out. And then I would take that information home and I would go study. Like, one of the things that blows my mind in the year 2021 is that there are still people out there who think they can't learn something new and they have an iPhone in their hand. And preferably I want to do this stuff on a laptop, but you get my point. Internet connection, right?
Yeah.
You can find anything anywhere. Like, there may be some really difficult questions where you can't find the exact answer. And that is why God invented Reddit. Because you go to Reddit, you'd be amazed when you find these right forums, or these right subreddits, I should say, where you can ask the most exact questions. I mean, I asked some absurd ones that actually the people who ended up answering them loved it because they're like, oh, wow, like this guy's he's got the detail. And so even if it was like something simple for them, they'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, cool, here's how you do it. And so I would utilize that. And so when I would get to a point where I couldn't get a question answered, and this probably happened 10 times, 10, 12 times, something like that over the course of 6 months, I went to Reddit and I got it answered every time. And then other times there were things I just had to figure out as I was doing things. Like, there are things that I did production-wise, stylistically on day one of this podcast, building it, that I would laugh at today, you know, and that's from, it's the 10,000 hours theory or whatever. And I don't even know if that's true. I don't know if that's backed by data, but there is something to when you are focusing and working on something for so long and continuing to build and get experience that, like, if you're not just busting your head against the stone wall and doing the same thing over and over and not questioning anything, you know, it wouldn't work that way. But if you're not doing that, like, you're going to have some breakthroughs.
Yeah, it's the power of iteration, I think.
Yes.
Because I feel that as well. When we're doing tassel, it's like, you know, you start with a V1, it looks terrible. But if you're not embarrassed by your V1, you're doing it wrong. You know, like, at least you can like, get it out there, get feedback, and just keep improving.
Exactly. And that's a really important point, Krish. Like, you have to go solicit feedback, and you got to be thankful when you get it without soliciting for it, because usually that's better feedback in either direction. The other level to that, though, is you have to know the difference between conviction and listening to criticism, because everyone's got an idea on how you should do everything. And this whole idea, like, listen to all criticism. Like, if you don't, you know, your mind's closed. No. If you listen, I'm not saying don't listen to it. I listen to all of it. But if you listen to and then try to apply all criticism, you will not have a product. Because everyone wants something a little different. You need to find the themes where people are hitting on the same thing, different types of people. And that's where criticism is now like, okay, that's interesting. And then you have to make sure that those types of people are the people that would be in your target audience. Because if they're not, then it's not interesting. You know, your target audience is going to be the people that you are going to hold their opinions higher than anyone else. And frankly, that's the right thing to do.
And so then when you were starting out, how did you go about doing that? I know you mentioned you talked to pros. Like, did you know them from before? Like, what was that outreach process like to get feedback?
No, I went to places that had reliable people. Like, one of them was literally a B&H Photo, which it was like a huge outlet up in one of their big locations up in North Jersey, and they have some experts in there. And so I sat with a couple of those guys for a full Saturday and just ran through, you know, with the equipment, holding it, looking at it, feeling it, touching it, testing it, and being like, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how that works. You know what I mean? Like, over and over, iterations like that. And then the rest of it was, you know, YouTube's the most powerful tool in the world, man. I mean, it gets frustrating when you get an hour video and you got to figure out what you need of it. I get that, but I'm pretty good at combing for stuff and moving quickly and cutting my losses when I can't find what I want. But some of the information that guys put out there, like, frankly, even shitty podcasters who just are great at setting everything up, like, thank you to those guys. And like, I'm glad they get a lot of subscribers because their expertise is at least in something like setting up a studio and knowing all the things that go into it. And they deserve that because they're adding a ton of value that way. But yeah, I mean, it was all, I had worked in media and I had done some work there with my LLCs, but we always had a producer on site. It was always on-site stuff, and never in a million years would I get a shiver up my spine thinking about the equipment we use, because I would never use it. Some of it was really good, but then others, it's like, no way. I could never go back and do it that way. And then, you know, to other people, it's like, oh, that's a really solid production. But like, to me, if you are picking something as your thing, like if you're saying like, hey, I'm going to make this podcast my job, if your production is not better than Joe Rogan's on day one, get the fuck out. It's just, it's how it is. When you are building it on the side and you have a long time period to do it, different story. But if you're like, yo, I'm not going to do anything else. Like, this is what I do 7 days a week, right? I don't have a life right now. I'm building this thing. If my production is not at least as good as or better than Joe Rogan's, well, then why would anyone listen to me already? Because I'm already not him. You know, you got to look at the Michael Jordan of whatever you're in and say, hey, whatever I can do to one-up that person on day one that is in my control, I must do that.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of interesting things there, though, to unpack. So one of them was you're defining your apex as, like, because you've clearly identified that your podcast competes with Joe Rogan's. Not every podcast will compete with Joe Rogan's, right? There could be, like, I don't know, like some sort of horror show podcast, whatever.
Yes,
like,
yes, I would agree with that.
The audiences are different. So you're like, hey, I'm positioning my product to have a high overlap with Joe Rogan's audience. And so now that I'm competing in the attention, I don't know, is that how you, okay, so if I'm competing in the attention economy and I have 24 hours in a day, like my user does, and let's say they spend 4 hours of the day, because Joe Rogan's is a pretty long podcast, assuming they listen to the whole thing, 3 to 4 hours a day, just listening to podcasts.
Yep.
Or maybe it's even lesser, but like, let's use that as the upper bound. Now I have to compete within that 4 hours time slot for their attention.
Yes.
And so to do that, I now have to look at who are my competitors, who's number one here.
Yep.
And now I need to either be at their level and then differentiate in some other way, or be like, I will match you for quality of conversation and then one up you on quality of like a production.
Yeah.
Like that's
okay. Now there's a lot to unpack here. I love how you put this though. You put that perfectly from the front end, because you said, unless you're like a true crime show or a horror show or something like that, like something very specific, like especially those narrative shows, they are an entirely different vibe. Like, you don't go watch CNN and then view that as the same entertainment that you do when you go and watch a movie on Netflix. You know, they're two different things. Now,
exactly. Yeah.
You are still competing for time, so maybe the Netflix movie's content just ends up being so good that you bail on CNN. I mean, I guess everyone's bailing on news these days, but you know, you bail on CNN, right? After a while, because it's like, even though that's a different vibe, I don't get as much entertainment out of that. So still, that's applicable. But yeah, every podcast that is not some sort of like narrative set niche like that, even ones that have a niche of a topic, which if it's not in front of a business, that is very hard to do. And some people do really pull it off, right? I'd have to think of some examples. I definitely have them in there. But if you are just recording and talking, even if it's like something I think is terrible, like prepared interview questions and reading off a page, right? Which you don't really see. But even if it's something like that, you are competing with Joe Rogan. You are competing with Dak Shepard. You are competing with Pod Save America. You are competing with Ben Shapiro. There's not a choice here. There are 24 hours in a day, and there are 200 million people in this country who listen to podcasts. They're going to decide where they get their entertainment from. So, like you talk about audience. Yeah, my audience is definitely different than Joe Rogan's. And I'm a huge fan of Joe, and one of the reasons I've always been a fan of him is because I think when we become fans of things, we find a lot of similarities in like personality with whoever that person is. And what I love about him is, like, I don't have a ton in common with him. He's a very different guy, and yet fuck with his content big time. It's incredible, right? Because he just talks with people. So there is an overlap in that respect. But like, I have my audience defined as to who it is, and I'm sure like some of that goes to his audience, no doubt. But you know, I think there's I'm from a different generation. I definitely have a different vibe in that way. But yes, I'm competing with him and many others directly. And when you look at it, I mean, think of it, use the basketball example again. Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal have nothing in common how they play on the court. They're completely different players. But Shaquille O'Neal can't go out there and say, yeah, I don't compete with Michael Jordan. I don't worry about him. No, because like the road to the championship goes through Michael Jordan. The road to winning the game goes through that guy. Well, the road to getting attention, which is championship stuff in this business, goes through the best. It goes through, go look at the top 100 podcasts, top 150 podcasts on Stitcher or on Apple Podcasts. Or does Spotify even have rankings with that now? I haven't even checked.
I don't know, because I can't see downloads or anything on Spotify. Like, Spotify shows nothing. There's no reviews.
Yeah.
I actually don't like the fact that there's no like feedback on a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like on your end, but yeah, as a user, there's nothing.
Yeah, I can't remember if they have the rankings, but you're right. There's no feedback sections and stuff like that, so they may need to fix that. But either way, you go look at those rankings, you compete with all those shows. If you want to eliminate the true crime ones and the narrative ones, okay, I'll level with you there. That's fine. But you compete with all of them. So my belief with competition is that, you know, it's like the Peter Thiel theory. You don't have competitors. You have you. You have a product that only you build. And so with podcasting, the beauty of it is a form of creativity. There's not a set way, like, there is not a set way that you are going to capture attention. There's not a set way to say sentences on camera. There is you, your mind, the way you process things, the way you communicate, the way your tone is, the types of people you talk with. This is all art in that way. And then the art is natural because that's what I do at the end of the day. I just talk with somebody, right? But the things that go into that, two people talking together in a conversation form versus another two people talking together in a conversation form are two very different things. And so you have to build off of your own standards with that, in my opinion. So yes, you have to recognize that when you are valuing your potential listeners and viewers' time, which you must, like, I think 1 second of their time is important in the year 2021. You know, you have to recognize that you are competing with everything else out there. But then when you are actually creating the quote unquote product and doing it, if you are thinking about these podcasts and, well, how would they do that? You've lost. That's a terrible idea. The only thing I thought about that with was going into before I ever made the podcast, which is what is the equipment they have, the sound they create, the vision they create, and why do people like it? And then how do I create something within that that's my own? And that's what I did.
Okay. Yeah, that's really, it's a lot there. It's very interesting to see your insight on that. I think to retrack a bit then, what does it take, like, in terms of processing this? Like, so let's say you and I shot a video, or like, you know, like your last episode with Jordan or whatever. Like, so how long does post-processing then look like for you? Or is it all, you spend the time, you've preset everything, and then you're good to go?
Oh, no. No, so I film on 3 different cameras and 2 different mics. And so I capture everything. I capture all the visuals, and then I have to upload all that. The regular episode, you know, my average runtime is a hair above 3 hours, right, on an episode. So the regular kind of data I'm dealing with is in the hundreds of gigabytes per episode. It probably lands a little south of 200, like maybe 150 to 200 gigabytes on capture from cameras. And then the audio, it's not that much. Maybe it's like 4, 5, something like that. And so I got to go upload all that, and then I got to go line everything up. And Adobe Premiere, I can do that pretty quickly, and some of the external things I use that have fast read-write times, like I could do that pretty quick. But the process of then creating the episode where you see the cameras flip at certain moments and then cut to different angles and stuff, that is all after the fact, and that is all manual. And so there are things, there are technologies, for example, that automatically flip between mics based on when someone's talking. It's like some equipment you can get, or like some, I don't even know what it is. But
is it software or is it like a hardware thing?
I think it's a little bit of both. But don't quote me on that because I don't use it. And the reason I don't is because you get what you pay for, man. You get what the time pays for too. And so there are little things that you and I, as an audience member, would not notice, that I wouldn't have noticed as much either if I wasn't like so obsessive and curious before I ever did this. But most people aren't going to notice it, where like the camera will flip from one person to another, and how it flipped. Did it flip after the first person had already said one word of the response, or did it flip before that where we saw their face? And then did it look clean when it did that? If you have equipment that's going to automatically do that and say like, oh, everything's processed for you already, you're going to lose quality. Now, if you have an in-studio producer, which I'm not there yet, I mean, I gotta have someone I can pay 6 figures a year.
You gotta get Jamie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to get to that point. They can get a TriCaster, and they can handle that. And then they can also go back and edit places where the cut wasn't as great. If you notice with Joe, though, I can't speak to recent podcasts because I haven't watched one in a long time. I barely get to listen anymore. But at least, I guess, like the last time was right before he moved to Austin. That was right when I was launching. So I was studying a lot of that and watching a lot of that. There is a quality loss on what they do. The quality of my cuts on my podcast is better because they are doing it live with the TriCaster, which one day I will do. But I don't know that Jamie goes back and touches up so that if he had the camera, for example, on Joe for 5 seconds while another person was talking by accident, it appears to me he doesn't go back and fix that. What I also respect about that, though, is these guys do like 4 a week. So it's like,
it's the volume.
I am not going to hold that against them at all, and their production's phenomenal. And people can hold that against a guy like me because they have no reason to listen to me while I'm building. I don't have that reputation. When I have that reputation, hey, I'll probably do that, and I'll get away with it, and it's no problem. And if someone complains, well, fuck you. But right now, like if you're looking to build, can't do that. You have to do it right. So, you know, when you're talking about time, yeah, I mean, it's 7 days a week. Like, that's not an exaggeration. I haven't had a full day off since I launched this 7 months ago. You know, there's not a set time on an episode. I feel like I have a pretty good flow of how quickly I can get through it, but then that's just the start, because now I got to chop up content. Now I got to go in and find places and really, really get exact with it, especially when I'm leveraging things like TikTok and YouTube Shorts.
The highlights.
Yeah, where it's like, yo, I gotta find a way to get this to 29.09 seconds. Like that.
Hey.
It is that exact. And there can't be more than 2 out of 24 seconds of silence at any given point on the clip throughout that, because someone will swipe away. So that work and go, and you know, it's the gift and the curse of, I have amazing conversations in here with people. Like, the content we've gotten blows my mind. There's like too much of it though when you're going in to look for stuff like that. There are not 2 clips per episode for YouTube, right? Like, and I'm talking 7-minute clips. There's literally 10 minimum that are quality. Now go find 30-second cuts within those, within every episode, which I film at least 1 a week. That's stressful. It stresses me out every day, because I'm like, well, I could use this. Oh, I could use that. Well, maybe this part isn't good. Well, if they see this and they don't like this and they get used to that guy's face, they won't they won't go with the next piece of content I put out on him, you know, 3 weeks from now. You know what I mean? Like, these little things that the human brain tracks when they're consuming content. That first impression is everything. So then, like, trying to figure out, well, what is great and what's the best, and then what should I go with first? That probably wastes time throughout. It definitely wastes time throughout my week.
Hey, I know a wonderful piece of software you could use.
Yeah, and your software, by the way, nice little plug for you. I'm blown away with your software, and I think that it is really good for finding YouTube content and finding certain types of Instagram content. I go next level and I do some production on my end on my clips that like no technology is ever going to be able to do. But to get to those points where that's all I then had to do is a time saver, right? And so I think people looking to use your tech on YouTube and Instagram, if they are trying to put out some solid volume and build over time, like this is for them. I mean, it really, it goes in and it finds places that are literally backed by data. You know, that's how you ran your algorithm to be able to figure out like what's going to be the most compelling moments where the words themselves are something that the audience is going to be able to get a hook on. That's huge. And then that can also whittle down places where, you know, I talked to you about having so much content and what's great and what's the best. It can help whittle it down more. I think it's incredibly applicable to podcasts that are looking at like 1 hour runtime, because I'm just thinking about it from a perspective of how long, you know, getting to that point where you catch the vibe right and then, you know, the real shit starts to happen. There's less, but then there's also like, oh, you can get it exact. Like, okay, here's the, yep, that's the point right there. That was the moment, you know?
Yeah, like the goal with this was, because I heard the same thing that you're talking about right now with the highlights, with like from so many other people, and they were more casual podcasters than you were, and they were like, I spent like hours on this, and it was like, could we just give you options that you can cut down further? Because at the end of the day, like you said, right, there's no math behind like this is a highlight, because it's such a personal decision. Like even in our conversation, there's been so many moments where I'm like, this is such a cool moment. And then what finally you end up picking is just like, it's going to be like a very like stylistic choice more than anything else. And so it's like, can you provide options to you that you can further cut down and then put it out there? If you like, you know, like just reduce the search time instead of like being like end to end, just like, like, so if my search space goes down from 1 hour to 8 minutes, assuming 8 clips of 1 minute each, like that's time save.
Yes, it's huge.
But yeah, so
it's huge.
moving from the tassel plug, I actually wanted to dive a bit more into the value of a video versus audio only podcast, and maybe how that even affects the equipment you use or the way you build a studio around that.
I don't think that if you're serious about, like, if you go to make a podcast and you're like, this is my thing, and you don't do video, you're done. Pack it up. You have no shot. And I think that if you're building it to get any kind of attention, that's why I like doing this the way you're doing it and making sure you get us on video, critical, because it's something, right? You know, it's not going to be the same because it's over a Zoom, but at least, like, you know, I got a setup here, so I got a mic, so there's some quality there, right? And then we're having a nice conversation. You can cut up this and at least put that out on social, and people know you have a narrative to this. It's not like, oh, listen to my new show. I'm planning on doing 5,000 episodes for the rest of my life, and here's the type of content you can expect for that whole thing. They're like, oh no, he's doing a 20 episode series on how to make a podcast. Oh, I was thinking about doing that. You know what I mean? And now you have that visual to put out to people, and now they want to engage. Now it has some legitimacy. Now they see the faces with it too. So that was never a question. What did blow my mind, and maybe I you know what, I probably just didn't think about this hard enough, but when I was doing my research on, you know, just the entire market, you know, the all data around the podcast market, individual shows, whatever, I found that people watch podcasts. Like, they really do. And me, I never watched a podcast in my life. I go to Apple Podcasts, I go to Spotify, I put it in my ears, right? I move around and I go about my day. I did know that, like, sometimes when I'd be at home and like doing like chores around the house and stuff, I would throw a podcast from YouTube on the TV, but it's not like I'm sitting there and watching it. But then I thought about it more, and I'm like, well, I would come by when something crazy in the conversation was happening. I would like stare at the screen and watch them. You know, and then obviously they cut this all up into clips. So I'm like, okay, I am going to make the entire thing in video, and I'm going to edit the entire video and upload every episode as its video version as well. So it's just the audio with the video on top, and it's going to be the highest quality thing, just like every clip I was ever planning to make. I knew that pretty early on, and I was thinking, damn, no one's going to watch that. no one's going to do it. And it's not like, you know, my audio audience has grown faster than my YouTube audience, no question about that. But you look at these people and they watch it, man. And people they watch the podcast. A lot of people, and now I can relate to this, people have 3 screens at their desk, and they throw it on the 3rd screen. And it's not like they sit there like this and watch the entire time, you know, for 3, like they don't do that, but they glance over, right? They're like, oh, let's see, you know, they want to see that facial expression. So it's critical, and the data's there, and actually, it depends where you look at the data, so there's not a hard number on it, but just putting all the things that I viewed together and doing some rough math, yeah, like 25-30% of people will consume it on YouTube versus on the audio platforms, on the average podcast. That's pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah. What's your average watch time on YouTube, if I may ask?
Per episode? Like, what do I get on an episode? My average watch time...
Not views, just yeah.
Yeah, my average watch time is probably about 15-20 minutes an episode. And I can't really pay attention to that data because it's skewed. Because there's a lot of people who just come in and click quickly to explore the page. My page, I only have 1,500 subscribers, or a little, like 1,400 something.
1.44 is
yeah,
what I saw.
okay. Yeah, so I have 1.4 thousand subscribers on there. That's not a huge audience, and so the majority of my watch time, actually, even though I have my loyal base who clearly watches this thing, majority of my watch time comes from non-subscribers, which I actually like. So, because I know that a lot of my subscribers, you know, I don't know what the percentage is there on average, but, you know, you have your core people who are subscribers, but, you know, they're actually like they're watching it. And maybe they're spreading the word to some of these other people who are coming to the page. I don't know, right? But there's people coming to my page, and there's people clicking around on stuff. Now it's in their head, right? Even if they're like, nah, fuck this guy, I'm not subscribing to it. No problem. No problem. I'm going to get you coming back again. You're going to do something. You're going to see me again on TikTok. You're going to see me on the For You page and be like, that, I know that motherfucker. And then you're going to come back to my page, right? Like, the idea that someone is going to click a button and say, hey, I might dedicate some of my time to you is an absurd thing to me. And I take it very, very seriously. If someone watches 3 seconds of a TikTok video, I take that very, very seriously. And my expectations on people taking an action is unbelievably low, right? I feel like I got to earn every single millisecond that they ever even see my face or hear my voice. So when I see it translating where there are people, it's literally 75% of my volume right now is coming from non-subscribers. That's a really good thing. I think it's, I'll go check that for you. I think it's like 75%.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common on YouTube, actually. Like, you get a lot of views, but then, like, the subscribe levels are, like, lower. But then, like, who cares? Because you're getting a lot of views, and that's, like, the core thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah. The thing that I thought was, like, the reason that we chose video, because, to go back to the question, it was, like, because YouTube was the only platform that I think I could see that had good content recommendation or discoverability for non-text-based data. Right? Like, where do you get good? Like, I don't think, like, like, if you go to music, Spotify is good. Personalized recommendations, discoverability. If you go to, like, but if you go to podcasting, I don't think anyone's got, like, that really brilliant, like, For You. And, like, even within that, like, Spotify's got, like, individual shows, and then how many of them are you going to, like, look through? Versus YouTube's got, like, an entire, like, platform. Like, you're going to scroll through a lot more. You're more likely to see episodes you don't see before. And so that's why... Yeah, that's sort of why we chose YouTube, just because it would give us discoverability in the same way that, like, TikTok gives you discoverability.
Yes.
Right? Like, TikTok is designed to be discoverable instead of being, like, fan-based. Like, how many people have already subscribed to you, you will, like, maintain loyalty there. But I think you almost live and die by, like, your, like, individual, like, posts on TikTok. Like, I've seen some people have, like, 1 million posts, and then the next one's, like, 100, like, the next one's, like, 1,000 people saw it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like post by post, right? Yeah.
You're raising a lot of great points right now. First of all, you just built the food chain. I don't know if you knew that, but the food chain, the bottom of the food chain, the shit at the bottom of the pile, as far as discoverability, is the audio platforms. They are disgusting. There's no, like, I technically do the SEO every week. I do it like this now. I don't even, I don't waste any of my time. I throw whatever keywords I think, boop, boop, boop. It's like 30 seconds of my week because my time is not good there because it's bullshit. Yeah. There's no, and it's, podcasting is a really like behind closed doors business. Like, they don't show you number of subscribers. There's no transparency. You don't know what shows are paying these platforms. I mean, you can figure it out, right? But like, they're paying to get on certain pages, and not even a lot of people use the browse function on there to look around. Like, their podcast is huge word of mouth when it comes to that. So you better have the best word of mouth all time and capture everyone's attention day one if you're going to try to go viral there. And frankly, that was a mistake I made in the first few months of this podcast. I didn't even tell anyone I had a YouTube page, basically. I mean, it was there. You knew it was there. Never pumped it. Never sent people there. Probably had like no views, right? Was not using anything with it. And then I realized, oh, that's a mistake. Okay. Because there is discoverability there. Now, the discoverability on YouTube is incredibly limited. It's incredibly limited because you have to get to 1,000 subscribers, which I only recently got to, right? To even like maybe have a ticket to the lottery. So there's a lot of tickets to the lottery I put out there on good content that no one, you know, no more than 50 people saw. So it doesn't matter. And it's a shame, right? But then you really got to get to 10K because that's where it'll start. My understanding, you know, some people listening are better experts at this than me, but my understanding is that's where the algorithm starts to take you a little bit seriously, and it'll put you on some of those discoverability pages more likely because I do the vidIQ thing. I sit there, feel like it's a waste of time every time because these keywords, I mean, it's like throwing shit against the wall. But the top of the food chain is TikTok because on TikTok, it is the best social media algorithm in the world, and it's not close. And YouTube, which has Google behind it, so this blows my mind that they're behind the eight ball here. But, you know, like I do YouTube Shorts now, and it blows me away how crappy their algorithm is compared to TikTok. It's like a joke. And I think because, for example, I will sit there and I will watch on my phone TikTok work and deduce who it's sending it to based on if I used hashtags, which they don't really value that much anymore, right? So I'm limited with those, which I had to learn over time, right? Or the text that's within my caption, or the length of my video, or the subject matter that I know their artificial intelligence is picking up on the words that are coming out to then make patterns and then send it and test it to certain audiences. I watch them send it to 15 people in the first minute to test out to see if anyone likes it, which when a video is at 0 likes, the like ratio is going to be lower. The lower the likes, the less likely someone is to hit that button and like put their name on it, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're a big name, even at the beginning, like even Logan Paul at the very beginning of a video, they're much more likely with him to actually do that, right? But it's still not at the same ratio that it is when they see his video when it's already at 7,000 likes, or especially when it gets to, you know, the one decimal where it's like at 10,000 or above, and then 100,000, obviously game over. But with TikTok, I will watch it send that, and then I'll watch it send them to 25 people, and I'll see how many likes happen there and if comments did. And then I'll look, if there's a comment, I'll look at the profile and I'll see if I can deduce anything from that person. And I can watch it work. And sometimes, like, and this one's more rare, but sometimes a video won't go for 6 hours. That it looked like it should have been going, and then it wasn't, and then it does. And it works. Whereas with shorts, you have no idea. You have no idea who they're going to send it to, and there's not a lot of people making shorts out there. So my content should be going to a lot of places. I am exactly what they want. I'm an early adopter posting every day. Quality content, too. You know, there's not a lot of podcasts utilizing this. There's not a lot of channels utilizing this. Like Theo Vaughn's doing it. You know, he's doing a nice job. But there's a few others, but like even Logan, like I think they did 1 or 2. They haven't done any since. And I look at it, and some videos it just won't send to anyone. Like they'll get 20. I got 1,400 subscribers. They'll give me 15 views on a video because it's not putting it at my subscribers feed, nor do I want it to. I want them putting it in the shorts feed And then I'll have a video where they get 800 views, right? It all happens in an instant. They send it all out at once. I had one video early on get 1.7 thousand views. They all happened at 11:57 p.m. on a Tuesday night. That was it. So all the people who watched it at the same time received the video in their feed when it had 0 likes. And I think 13 of them actually hit the like. And as far as those 13 people know, they were the only person to like it. And then TikTok killed it. Yeah. Even if it had comments on it. Not TikTok. YouTube stopped it. That would never happen on TikTok. So TikTok is a place, you talk about doing video for a podcast. TikTok's the place to take it. And then it's a different vibe, though. Like, that's the funny thing about it. TikTok is very crowded now. And it's harder to get found. But the podcast community, for all the clutter they put out there, for whatever reason, they don't leverage the TikTok community at all. Like, it's very low. And then people will still say, well, there's a lot of podcasts on here. Because why? Why do they say it like that? Because the content is fucking terrible. What these podcasters do is they take their content, and actually I'm going to use you as an example here, and this is not at all to rip you, but I'll use this. Let's say you go in, Krish, and you find me a great minute and 37-second clip, which is longer than TikTok allows up to 60 seconds. And I just take 60 seconds from within that clip and put it onto TikTok. And maybe I even keep it at 1080 by 1350 and I don't put it full screen. That's like doing this to the user on TikTok. So there are even, and I won't name names, but there are even some great TikTokers who now have a podcast, right? Like celebrities, a lot of money, whose podcast content is garbage because they're just like, oh, I'll throw on there whatever. I'll do what's easiest for me, and they'll engage with that. No, they won't. The best podcast on TikTok is a show called Jumpers Jump, and it's 2 kids with braces. Well, the one guy hosts it, and then he has one of his friends in, like, on a rotating basis every episode in Canada, talking about conspiracies for an hour. And good for him. They're doing a great goddamn job because the content he puts up there is built for TikTok, and all of their content, I think maybe minus 1 or 2. They have hundreds of videos on there now. Every single one of their videos is 45 to 60 seconds, which is like no, right? Because TikTok's fast. And what happens when you have a 45 to 60 or 30 second and above video? It gives you a white line at the bottom. So when someone's scrolling, they instantly see that line that shows like the progression of the video. And so they're instantly like, oh, it's moving too slow. I'll go to the next one, which crushes you in the algorithm. Whereas if you put up a 1-second video or a 29.5-second video, anywhere within there, there's no line. So they're more likely to stay, and then they get invested, and then they're like, all right, even if it's going longer than they want, they're like, well, when's it over? I got to stay till the end. And then they still like it. So there's such a huge opportunity there, and I've had some early success. I mean, we got to see what happens here. It's incredibly early, and I just believe you have to make the best content, you know, but that is a space that if you're in podcasting and you're creating a high quality studio setting with great video content and phenomenal audio content, you can stand out there.
Yeah, we're actually working on a lot of interesting tools to do because it's not just, I'm sure you spend a lot of time getting the aspect ratios right, making it look full screen.
Yes.
Things like that, because you're taking landscape and you're making vertical.
Yes.
And like cutting it rightly. It takes time. So we're actually like working on a lot of like, tools to fix that problem. Or not fix the problem, but like reduce the time it takes to do that. Like we're working on, can you identify who's talking, cut accordingly? How do you like zoom out so it's not like one giant face looking at you on the screen? Yeah, there's like, it's very interesting stuff. But quickly, like before jumping into the conclusion stuff, I wanted to get your thoughts on, let's say do you have any, what kind of advice would you give to any podcaster, like a student getting into podcasting, maybe a couple in episodes in and wants to figure out how to build a studio, you know, like what would you tell them?
Google is your friend. YouTube is your best friend. And going down rabbit holes is your wife. That's really like That's what I would tell them. And then I would also tell them to identify anyone in their network who has some level of expertise on stuff and ask questions. I did do that. So day one, I had some guys who knew some shit about audio with podcasts. Like, even if they weren't like preeminent experts, in my book, they were experts, and they were a huge help because they got me pointed in some of the right directions. That saves you time, right? So find that, but you really just got to sit in there with your coffee, and if you love this, if you want to go, it should be fun in a way. You know, like I was like, oh, damn, that's how that works. Like, I remember the day I found the CloudLifter, and I'm like, that's how they do it. That's how they do it. Oh, my God. You know, and like, I didn't know what a CloudLifter was. CloudLifter, I thought we were packing a bowl. Like, you know, it's like a CloudLifter is a form of a preamp. It's a type of preamp. It's the best one. And I didn't talk about that, but if you get a mixer and you get Schures, you get Shure mics, get a CloudLifter. It's literally called that. It's blue. It looks like this underwhelming blue brick. And you're like, why the hell am I going to spend $150 or $200 on that?
Yeah.
You'll know when you plug it in. That was a moment for me because it came in like the day after this other stuff did. So I had everything plugged in. I'm listening. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And then the CloudLifter came. I'm like, oh, I guess you put it there. Okay. Whoa. Oh, you know, makes a huge difference.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. And then just to wrap up, like, what do you think were the most important, like, things that we covered during this? Like, in terms of like things you want them to remember. So we said the equipment was really important. Like you're saying, the mic, get a Shure mic. Get
Shure SM7B.
Shure SM7B. Focus on getting a camera. That's important. Having a high quality, but don't get 4K. Get 1080 because of the video.
You can get, so like my cameras are 4K cameras. You can get one that shoots in that because it probably has more power to create a better 1080 picture. It probably has more tools on it. Yeah. So yeah, I would recommend don't what's the word? Don't shirk on the camera. Like, get a good one. You don't have to go get one of those $5,000 ones, but if you're going to spend $1,000 on something, spend it on the camera.
Okay. Interesting. And then from that, it's like the next thing we talked about that I think was really cool was the idea of like the differences in audio versus video podcasts, and then like why the benefits of being audio, you know, like you're thinking in terms of discoverability, leveraging TikTok, where actually it's really funny that you're
being video, you mean benefits of being video.
Yeah, right? yeah. Sorry, benefits of being video. Yeah. And then it's funny you talk about this because we have an upcoming episode with Michael Sican from Our Future. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he has over like 600,000 views on TikTok for his podcast. It's a business focused podcast for young entrepreneurs. And so we're talking about, he interviews all these CEOs. So we're just talking about like how he leverages TikTok and LinkedIn and stuff for growth. And then also how he like lands these kind of interviews. Cause you know, it's
what's his at? I want you to send that to me afterwards.
Yeah, I will.
I don't know if I saw that,
hey,
but would love to see that.
It's all,
would love to check that out. Yeah. That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very, very impressed with what you guys are building. And from doing this and knowing all the different platforms you got to leverage and the time it takes to customize for each of those platforms, what I like about your value prop is that you are leading with how are we saving people time before you're iterating products. And there are not, there are a lot of really brilliant 40-year-old engineers who have been around Silicon Valley who aren't leading with the important thing like that. So I love that. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, one sec. Don't